welcome back to Zoom, you all. It seems like it's been a while. Tonight we will discuss, I think you probably read the email, we'll discuss some of the educational events that have been offered recently. And we know that that was a key component of this group. So we're going to try to continue our education. But first, as always, we would like to start with a prayer, and Father has graciously said that he would lead us. Father?
You all don't know how she manipulates me to do this. But despite that, let us pray. Holy One, you sent Jesus among us to speak to us, to teach us, to transform in us what was in need of transformation, so we, as individuals and as a people, could be who we are created to be. As we gather tonight, we acknowledge there are many versions of Jesus among those calling themselves Christian. We fear some of those versions may not reflect the truth of him who seeks to be the truth. So tonight we ask for the humility to let his voice announcing the kingdom be heard without the interference of our own voices. We understand that the more he is a reflection of our own voices, the greater the risk of not discovering or living the justice that is your kingdom. So we now ask for a keen, listening heart, a desire to discern what is true, and the willingness to join you in the revealing of the kingdom. May this be the wisdom we pursue and have the privilege of discovering tonight as we do what we as a church are called to do: listen to one another, speak to one another, and be guided by the Spirit of truth. Amen.
Amen.
And thank
Beautiful
you so much,
prayer.
Father.
Thank you, Father.
As always. So like I said, we've missed you all on Zoom, but it's was certainly wonderful to be together in person on the 17th when we saw Dr. Taylor. So we will be discussing that. And plus, I know a lot of you went to the thing, which was wonderful. Thank you so much, Marianne, for sending that, because I know a few of us already have discussed that we've been able to watch it, even though we weren't able to go that night. So thanks so much for that. And that topic is always powerful. The Christian nationalism, and we will discuss both of those tonight. And then the third thing we were going to discuss, the only member of our group that was at the SBCLT event was Sue, and she's unable to come tonight. I got a text from her a little earlier, and she won't be able to make it tonight. So we're anxious to hear what everybody has to say about any of the presentations. And I will tell you that I'm going to the SBCLT event on Saturday, and I know a lot of you are going to the Pride Parade. So we're supposed to get an update down there and do some looking at some of the sites, I guess, that have been transformed. So anyway, I'll be able to fill you in on that soon, hopefully. So why don't we start with the conversation that Dr. Gordon, the presentation that she gave at Nativity, the journey to social justice. And would anyone like to start with that?
Yeah, I took a lot of notes today. I watched it not long ago. And she got into what she calls the complex and volatile racial climate that is fairly prevalent in the last 6 years. And she talked about her personal history and about how this racism is rooted in social and economic policies and originated in slavery when Africans were dehumanized and thought of as not human so that they can dominate them, the Africans, the way they did. She went into what we need to begin to do besides witnessing this scourge of racism. We have to find a way to move forward from that. And she talked about active and direct engagement of the problem. And that could be done by CRT, critical race theory, is one of the things that she says is being threatened, and sort of diminished by attacking what they call wokeness, being woke, and it's this attack is meant to prevent the narrative of our history, and there's much more to it. I don't want to go over all these notes here, but that was how she started out. And she used some examples of what she calls social teachings and social justice principles that the church, the Catholic Charities, and the church is trying to promote. And she talked about complex relations of racism and justice. Now, I'm getting a little bit off here, but she uses examples, Trayvon Martin, the incident with him, as a way of talking about righteousness or the right to do something, like simply walk down the street, eat your Skittles, and drink your juice. And sure, he had the right to do it, but his right was threatened by a person who felt he had the right to question his freedom to do that. So so it wasn't just Trayvon Martin. She used as an example the time when the young man was in the car at the gas station and who was playing loud music, and someone was offended by his loud music and decided to kill him. So that was another example. And then there was the example of the jogger. I can't remember his name. If anybody knows, you can speak up.
Robbery.
Right, the jogger. And the last example she used was the kid who got lost when they rung the wrong doorbell in the neighborhood. He was looking for his brother, I believe, and got shot. Now, I don't remember if he died from that. I don't think
No, he didn't. No.
but
Luckily.
yeah,
Luckily, he didn't die.
yeah.
Right.
And then what the main thing she was trying to say, to overcome this racism, we have to have conversations and not what she called diatribes, where people just holler and scream at each other, and that's not a way to address the issue. And one last thing, I think she asked the question, why does truth have no value? And it seems to be prevalent right now, where certain people are in denial in this country. And she quoted a guy named Stanley Ben, who said the biggest lie is when truth is made a lie and a lie is made the truth. So
The biggest evil, right?
the biggest evil, she may have said that, yeah, the biggest evil. But she did say this evil is caused by a lack of empathy.
Mhm.
And she used the example of the Nuremberg trials, when this defendant for the Germans was trying to answer the question of evil. And, you know, what's the one thing in common that all the defendants had? And that was a lack of empathy.
Mm.
Mhm. Right.
Dennis, that
Yeah.
was a great pulling out so many of her key ideas for those people who didn't get to go that night or watch the video already. Dennis just gave a great synopsis there of a lot of her key points. So thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And I think Mary Catherine had her hand up first.
Well, I think you did give a good summary of it all, but she started out by saying people don't want to talk about racism. And we see that particularly in this fighting this woke and critical race theory, that they don't want anybody to talk about race or teach about race. And that, well, actually, if you don't talk about it, people don't learn the history, it gets repeated. So that's not good at all. And of course, she talked about getting into good trouble and also speaking up. And she gave an example where somebody was behind her and going to be near her during a meeting and said, well, since I'm going to be behind you, be behind you, nigger. and she turned around and said, why do you use that term? Does it give you a thrill? What is it about that? And the lady said, well, that's what everybody calls you. So that's the only name I know. So not addressing her as a person or anything. It was just really, but they did become friends in the long run because she called her on it. You know, she interrupted her and didn't let it just go that way. And I thought the stress about, I had never heard that, summarizing evil as no empathy, but definitely that's for sure. The people that have no empathy don't care about anybody else, think about anybody else, and that gives them a right to kill or do whatever else. But the other thing when she was talking about changes was that a lot of young people have a hatred for themselves and not a good image. And that lack of self-image causes them to hurt other people and also hurt themselves. But I thought that was very strong. And I do see there are many programs in the city now to work with young kids to increase their self-respect and self-image. And if that will make a difference, that would be a wonderful thing. And also to teach conflict resolution, because everybody gets angry, conflict resolution early on in life. So instead of acting out on it, hurting somebody or lashing out, they can learn other ways that will resolve it.
Thanks so much, Mary Catherine. And just for your all knowledge, as you know, a lot of people are at City Springs now. They have a whole conflict resolution. I don't know what you want to call it, but the students work on it. They teach it. It's actually very good. So, Father.
Yeah, this goes back to Dennis. I didn't have a chance to listen to it yet, so I appreciate Dennis taking the time to summarize. He was talking about the young woman or the person who went to a house, wrong house, just because he got the address mixed up and was shot. I think over the course of the week, there were 3 different instances of that around the country. In some cases, it ended up in murder. So what it triggered for me is what role fear plays in all this as well. And in all honesty, I haven't heard a lot of conversation about the reality of fear and the impact that it could have. I think it's something that, at least to acknowledge, is a piece of the puzzle. It's not making a judgment about whether the fear is right or wrong. The issue is there is fear, and I think trying to understand the root and origin of the fear becomes something rather significant and important.
Definitely. Thank you, Father. It's kind of like that.
That's a good point, Father Ray, because I don't think Dr. Gordon even talked or mentioned that idea of fear in her.
Well, I would have to say in all the presentations we've had, I can't remember a time where the discussion or the presenter talked about what role fear plays in the midst of what I think all acknowledge are some real complexities to the issue of racism.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing or understanding the other here. Mary Ann?
In terms of fear, she told some dynamite stories about her own, the one Mary Catherine just said, where she turned around and said, "Do you get a rush out of calling me the N-word?" But she told some other stories, one of which, it was an incident where she confronted her older brother about his total rejection and anger toward his younger brother who had come out as gay.
Right.
And the family asked her to do some kind of intervention, and she called him, and after talking about general things, she said, "I have a question for you. What is it you are afraid of about your own sexual identity?" And he flipped the gut, and screamed and swore and yelled and hung up on her. And he's like, "Why would you say that?" And the point, I think, is if is there something that you are afraid of inside you that makes you have to belittle somebody else? And apparently it worked, because a couple months later, the guy invited everybody in the family to Thanksgiving and said, in particular, his younger brother and his partner. And then she told the story of going into a conference where there was this guy passing out leaflets of people who should be on the hit list to be excommunicated. And she noticed a lot of important people, and she noticed her own name. And she asked the person, "What about this person?" And the gentleman went on and on about that guy. "Oh, that guy, he's liberal, he's this, he's that." And she said, "That's me." Very clearly not a guy. "Oh, well, you must be a person, who's for gays and things." And she went back and asked him the same question. So, yeah, when she talks about direct, polite engagement, she doesn't pull any punches. And she talked also about the need to form alliances. We have to go beyond the acknowledgement and witness, as Dennis said, but then we have to find like-minded and like-hearted groups. Because she said the civil rights movement did not succeed because Blacks marched. It succeeded even more because others besides Blacks marched in solidarity. And she did a whole lot of wonderful connection between, it wasn't wonderful, it was very sad, dehumanization of Black people and dehumanization of the Holocaust victims. Part of her address was being heard by people at a synagogue. And so she very much tied all of that kind of dehumanization and lack of empathy together.
Thank you, Marianne. I did think that was one of the strongest things, the way she connected the Holocaust and the LGBTQ, and that she just racism, hatred, evil, no empathy. She connected them all, and it's what we're living so much today. Jerry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, what a great job Dennis did. And then to say that I think Father Ray nailed it. Those two things, fear and empathy, lack thereof, kind of drive so much human behavior that is negative and then is harmful. And I just feel like if we could all be aware of the things that we're a bit fearful of, and then try to put ourselves in another person's place, that might do a lot to improvement. And we can, and I think of all the committees that we have at church that we're trying to live those principles of Catholic social teaching, and especially the first one regarding to the dignity of the human person. And I think that we have a fear of acknowledging the wholeness of the human person, of people, that are so different than we are. That's what Pride is about on Saturday. And that's what our support of the South Baltimore Coalition is about. It's like recognizing that if we could put ourselves in someone else's place. I mean, she really did a great job of providing those examples and of being very frank, but people don't know what woke is, and they get scared about it. And I had a really close relative of mine say to me yesterday, your problem, Jerry, is that you're not open. Well, I almost passed out because that's like, she said, you're liberal. And I said, do you not think that's what liberal means? And she said, no, I think I'm independent, so that I'm really open, but you're a Democrat. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I can really understand how she thinks that I'm not open because I'm a committed Democrat. So I'm closed to other information. So Ray's always talking to us, Father Ray, about trying to understand the other side of the story. And I get a little pissed at him because I think, oh, for God's sake, do we have to understand the other side? This is just frankly wrong. But he, in some ways, he's right, and we're all a little bit fearful about what we don't completely understand, and that prevents us from being empathic, putting ourselves in the other person's place. And I think she did a really good job of integrating them with real life stories and real life experience. So if you haven't watched it, do that. And I think for all of our committees like social justice and Green Team and Alive, that those are two things we ought to think about and pray about, what we fear and where we lack empathy. Okay, that'll be it for me tonight. I'm listening, but I won't be talking.
Thank you, Jerry, but you're welcome to talk because you always have good insights. But thank you very much. And now we'll go to the other Jerry.
I don't know what woke is. So if somebody can tell me what it is. I hear the word bandied about on T, and it passes by. I really don't know what woke means. So if anybody wants to educate me on that, that's fine. The other thing is, I agree 100% with Father Ray that fear is something that we need to discuss in the context of justice, equality, racism, whatever. That's what I think, that we need to start discussing, because it's been in the back of my mind ever since I joined this committee, that I think that's driving a lot of the social the feelings that people have about other races, not entire races, but segments of society. And that's something I think we need to start talking about, our fears. Instead of like, shouldn't have to be made to feel ashamed because, we're a certain race or whatever. But I think that, the fear part, I don't know, what do you think? Because by the way, and I are on the same page.
So thank you very much, dear. All of a sudden I lost you. Did we lose her?
She's there.
Could only hear half.
She moved, she,
Oh, there she is. Okay,
popped down.
sorry. I heard the noise. I thought maybe we lost her.
I would stop talking.
No, that's quite all right, Jerry. It looked like Skip, did you want to jump in on the woke? I thought it looked like you were ready.
Yeah, actually, if I can make 2 points. One, it's a kind of put down term, Jerry. It tries to denigrate and in a sense make fun of people who have sensitivities and insights about things like social justice, or I mean, you could take any of the major issues we're talking about, support for LGBTQ persons, all of the issues which are opposite to their leanings and their feelings. And it's almost like they're mocking the person with the term woke as if like, oh, you've got all the sensitivity and you've got all the answers and we don't have any. I wanted to say something about fear briefly too, because I think part of fear is a hesitancy to look at the reality in ourselves. And one area where that's really true is sexuality. Males, for instance, because of this crazy mixed up society, really see James Bond as the ideal male. There are very few James Bonds in this world. And so whatever the ambivalence may be in us, or whatever just amount of just humanness, where you're not a perfect this or perfect that. I think with people who feel they ought to be, that's a kind of fear. The latest thing I heard was last week where someone gave his friend a gun and said, here's your manhood back. That says it all. That your manhood lies in your power.
Thanks, Skip. Marianne, I think you were next.
thank you. You will remember, many of you, that Megan Hamilton came to church last Sunday, and she has been doing missionary work in Africa, and she considers St. V's her home, even though she lives in a variety of different places. And Al and I had the privilege of having lunch with her on Sunday, and I don't think she would mind if I shared this. I hope. She said she went to West Virginia. Her sister lives there, but she went there because she wanted to understand how the people think and what made them kind of react in what we would consider, that very super far right conservative way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to her, and what did you discover? And she said, well, not a whole lot. She said, but I discovered that they're afraid. And she said, they feel that they are denigrated and looked down upon
Mhm,
by East Coast intellectuals.
mhm.
And that the East Coast intellectuals are spending all the energy and all the government resources on migrants, on social justice for people of color, even though the people of color probably do not feel that way, but they feel left out and dehumanized.
Hmm.
And that is part of where that comes from. So once again, it's a fear factor. So
Thank you, Mary Ann. Yeah, keeps coming up. Mary Catherine, I think you were next.
Okay. Thank Mary Ann for sending the recording, because I also, after 2 months, did not remember and I didn't keep notes. But I thought also you putting there after the recording was all kinds of questions, reflection questions and many things. And Mary Ann suggested that many of our groups, this group particularly, could use some of those questions going forward. They were excellent about activities that we could be doing. I thought that was great.
Great. Thank you, Mary Catherine. In fact, I was going to see if Mary Ann and Jerry DeLombo wanted to team up and lead that discussion at maybe our August meeting or something.
that was actually Jerry Fieldkowski and I who had, rather than Jerry DeLambo, although it would be lovely to work with Jerry DeLambo as well.
Well, actually, I received an email from Jerry DeLombo that said, I think that's a really good idea that
Oh,
Mary.
excellent.
So
Good.
maybe the three of you could work, Jerry, and Mary Ann. And I haven't read them yet, so thank you very much.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Jerry DeLombo, is that hand still up or is it a new hand?
Again, so going back to what Marianne just said prior to this discussion about the reflection, and I don't want to step on anybody's political feelings or proclivities or whatever, but I think this fear of being left out is why Trump won when he won. And that was how I felt that day. I woke up, I looked at my phone on the floor. It said, Trump wins 45. And I said, that was it. People felt left out. I think that, and that's my opinion as to why he won. No other reason.
Mhm.
I didn't hear the end of that, Jerry. You said that's your opinion.
Yeah, it was I think no other reason except the people who voted him in were people who had felt left out.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that
definitely.
unfortunately, Mrs. Clinton, I think, did not reach enough people in, is it called the Rust Belt? I don't know, like Ohio, West Virginia.
Michigan.
I have relatives. I have a cousin and her, her whole family, and they're in that type of socioeconomic, type group, and they're in Ohio on the West Virginia border. And just in speaking with them, that's the conclusion I came to. Whether I'm right or not, I don't know, but it was again, it was a fear of being.
I think there's a lot to what you said, Jerry, because I remember specific instances where people were saying they were upset that Hillary didn't even bother to come and campaign there. So it's almost like that we didn't count. And it goes right back to everything Mary Ann said, in terms of people feeling that the East Coast intellectuals seem to run everything and have their own way. And it really says a lot about going back to empathy, understanding where other people are, and reaching out, as Father said, and truly communicating. Not, I mean, even if we are right, not acting and feeling that we got all the answers, and other people just need to shut up and do what we say.
Definitely. And the importance of dialogue. Jack, I think you were next. You're muted.
Sorry. I just wanted to mention a follow-up point to what Skip mentioned about guns. I read an interview from a former executive of a gun manufacturing company, and he's sort of changing his tune. But what he said is they are aiming their advertising at use, especially in social media, to use. And the advertising says, if you don't carry a gun, you're not a man. And it's totally throughout the advertising on guns. So just a follow-up to Skip's comment.
Oh, that's so sad. So sad. Thank you, Jack. Father? You're muted.
You're muted, Father.
I want to respond quickly to or add to what Jack just said. I think one of the things that we may not be sensitive to is how complicated, rightfully concerned about women and where women are and women having equal opportunity and being respected for the dignity that is theirs. I think we also have to be deeply concerned about where men are. And I think the struggle to figure out what it means to be a man in our culture at this particular time is not an easily answered question. And I think, as Jack just pointed out, some people take advantage of that, which is really more than sad. But that also bridges over to this, what Jerry was saying. I think we also have to be alert to the reality that some people want other people to be afraid so they can use them and manipulate them in order to achieve their goals. And so I think part of addressing issues related to fear is also being willing to examine the forces that keep fear perpetuated and how that actually is a manipulation of those individuals, which only drives it deeper and reinforces it. And as we all know, there comes a point at which fear, rather than pulling away, leads to aggressiveness, not only in language, but sometimes in behavior as well.
Thank you, Father. We definitely saw that with the immigration issue, and the murderers and rapists are coming from the South. Is it Anne or Robin that word should be?
Anne.
Anne.
Well, and I think it segues, pretty nicely into the whole topic of Christian nationalism, because that's what they do. They manipulate, they set up these, conflicts around, who's going to be the winner, who's going to be on top. And, if you don't follow our way, you're going to be left behind. And everything is so, I don't know, intermeshed. And she brought that up a little bit. She talked about Christian nationalism a little bit, not very much, but she did mention it. So I've been doing more reading around that, and the more I read, the more I realize, even in the news, there's people coming out saying all kinds of things, regularly that has those code words, and and earmarking, Christian nationalism, and the more it's kind of inculcated into legislation, the more insidious it becomes. But Florida is a perfect example of that, of all the laws that they passed recently against allowing certain things being taught in the schools. They're not allowing gender conforming medications to be used even by adults in Florida. People are being cut off in that sense too. I don't know. It's just a very complicated world we have right now, and it's hard to sort it all out. But when you talk about fear, I think fear is taught. I don't think we grow up fearful, but I think we're taught to be fearful, just as we're taught to hate. And so they're very intertwined and intermeshed in that sense too.
Thank you, Anne. So true. I keep thinking everything I'm listening to, these different speakers of how I'm going to have discussions in the future with people with opposing views, and just trying to remember all these things about, just asking questions like, well, why do you feel that way? Or, to start the dialogue, because there is just no dialogue at the moment that we see from our leaders. So it's very, very difficult. Father, are you still muted?
Someday I'll figure this thing out. I wanted to follow up on what Anne said. I think, we're taught to fear, but at the same time, I would suggest we're not taught what to do with fear when it does occur in our lives.
Mm.
And part of this is my homily for Sunday, because Jesus in the gospel, don't be afraid. So I'm a little primed for this tonight, but I think we at least have to ask the question, how effective are we at helping our children, and then later on adolescents and adults, to both understand the nature of fear, what it can do to us, and how do we go about handling this very powerful emotion in a way that doesn't cause harm either to ourselves or to someone else.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. Rita or Denny or Louise, I saw you all there. You're muted if someone's speaking.
It's okay. Now, is it muted?
No,
Now
is
you're
that
good.
Rita? Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yesterday on NPR, I listened to a program about the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, and they have just voted to not allow any women to have leadership positions within their congregations. And they're talking about thousands and thousands of people around this country. And they'll let them be teachers, or they'll let them be, the head of the finance committee or whatever like that. But they are backing up. And I think it's part of this same strain of whoever's got the power and whoever's in charge. Yeah.
What's FDC stand for?
Southern Baptist Convention.
Oh, okay.
They are the largest group of all the other groups besides Catholics and Catholic wannabes or have-beens. They're the biggest Protestant group in this country. And they're disbanding any group that does not want to have that rule, apply to them. There are places that already have women pastoring, but they're disowning them.
Yes.
Thank you, Louise. I read that too. I was like appalled. Anne or Robin?
It's Robin this time. I've got two thoughts that I've been trying to formulate an answer. One of them, and I keep going back to this, is one of the books that I read a long time ago, In a Different Voice by Carol Gilligan, revealed a sense of the difference of male values and priorities and female values and priorities. And to make a short work of it, men gravitate towards power and status and income and things like that, whereas women tend to network and become more comfortable in community. They use the example of, you go to a dinner with a half a dozen people, and the men end up talking about sports or stocks, and the women talk about recipes and families. And it's one of those things that we need to work a little bit on that. The other thought really has to do with taking me back to my early years in college and Skinnerian psychology, reinforcement. And somebody's talking about the need to belong. And when you have vacuums and people don't feel like they belong, and you come along with a bait, which is what they do with the Skinnerian mouse running around inside that trap. You have a bait and you say, well, no, look, we can give you all these kinds of things, and these people are wrong and it's their fault. And they're doing the blame game and those kinds of things. We have to learn treat a herd mentality that really is negativism. And so to emphasize the important values, faith among us, community among us, caring for the poor. I mean, they're all the Christian values in a way, but somebody's stolen with this Christian nationalism, stolen the whole concept, and then they're feeding people's needs. And it really is sad. And we really have to come out and I guess in a sense, the listening is a big part of it. And several of the great leaders in the country have focused on that. And listening not to argue, but listening to understand. And of course, I'll leave you with this thought. When I run into a person who's got their mind made up, the only thing that I can usually say to them is, what is your source? And when you find out what their source is, 9 times out of 10, you'll understand. You won't be able to debate, but you'll understand where they're coming from. And if they're a Trump lover, they're going to be a Trump lover, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Robin.
Peggy, I wanted to tag on to the brief time that we got into the Christian nationalism. One, I was so impressed by the amount of interest that Matthew Taylor's presentation raised and people's real motivation to want to learn. You all were fantastic, the whole group. And even for weeks afterwards in church, people, as we left, you know, we talk about it and all. And one thing that happened is I was telling my son Justin about it. And as you know, he is a writer and he's been researching, I guess, what we would consider dark things, because he's into this new genre that he calls contemporary horror, which is the horror is us, what we do to one another. And so the novel he's just completed is really about police violence and brutality, but that's in the horror genre again. And so when I was talking to him, I mentioned the question that I asked Dr. Taylor, because I really have been concerned about a couple of things, like one, seeing people who are Christian nationalists now who are African Americans, and understanding how easily many could slip into that, especially if you're coming from a Pentecostal or evangelical background, because of what he talked about in terms of how slick the presentations are, the music, even the lighting. It's like a stage production. All of that is enticing in a way, and the message is coming through that. But I still, until I asked my question, I still could not get a real handle on why would people of color want to be Christian nationalists. And his answer helped me a great deal when he talked about the Venn diagram, the overlap. You accept some of the overlap if it's giving you other things that you want. But I was still troubled because I still feel that I didn't hear a strong enough assertion that it still is, in my opinion, a largely racist construct as well. It's just how it's underplayed or not. So I was talking with Justin and I said, you know, gave him the Venn diagram. He said, yeah, but Dad, that Venn diagram can overlap in a lot of ways and not overlap. And he said, just ask yourself this question: who is this America being created for? Do you think they're doing all of this for us or for Latinos? And he just went on through the list. He said, no, this is for a white Christian America. They don't want indigenous people. They don't want Black people. They don't want Latinos. And so he said, so it is racist and underneath it all, whether or not it admits a few people in. He said, because there'll always need people to answer the phone, to cook the meals, to do the wash, to pick up, you know. He said, but it's racist.
What prior to that, I had said to Dr. Taylor, I had said white nationalism, and he said, that's not what I'm speaking on. I'm speaking of Christian nationalism. And I said, I kind of equated them as the same thing. And he was like, no, if you want white nationalism, then you need a different speaker. So that's why we really appreciated Justin's point of view, because it agreed with mine. No, okay. Just kidding. All right,
Yeah,
Pat.
no, and I think Dr. Taylor, because of his interest, rightly points out it excludes Jews, Muslims, everybody who's not a Christian, which is equally evil. I mean, the fear thing and all of it, all of those things are wrong. And one bias is every bias in a sense.
Yeah.
But it is racist as well, I believe.
Yep. Thanks, Skip. Pat?
Yeah, I think it goes back again to the whole fear thing. And any of those movements like that, when you're fearful of something, you'll latch on to anything that gives you some kind of answers or some kind of feeling of belonging, some kind of feeling of security. And any of those big movements like that will provide that for you. It's like that sense of a group cohesion, or like group psychology, that you feel like you belong to a group, and it's a group that you're afraid is being threatened. So you find comfort in other people who feel the same way that you do.
Absolutely. And Trump really knew that when he gave his speeches. Boy, he hit on that and made the other the enemy constantly, still doing it, dividing, and not to get political, but sorry, I had to use him as an example. So what are we going to do about, what can we do differently than what we're doing now because of these things that we've learned? Father?
Well, I'm wondering, I'm wondering if it might not be valuable for us to have an extended conversation about the nature of fear and really look at it from multiple perspectives. I am not familiar with someone, but if we could find someone who has a particular understanding and expertise around the role of fear and the nature of fear, and some strategies in terms of how we might prevent it, and when it does occur, how we can address it in a way that's that prevents it from causing harm either to the individual who's afraid or to the other person or persons that the person is afraid of.
Thank you, Father. We can maybe try to search for that. Marion, did you have your hand up, or?
I did, but this may be something for later on, but is there also something we could do? We had talked a while ago, and Dr. Gordon mentioned it. Is there a possibility that we could start to form an alliance here or there with another faith group? Get to know them, and if they are, people who value what we value, to work towards social justice, not just ourselves, but with more people, and to find their differences and celebrate them and use them to empower us, both groups or more groups, forward. That may not be something that we're ready to do yet, but it's a thought.
Yeah, actually, while Dr. What was her name? Greer
Gordon.
Gordon, sorry. I was thinking when I was listening to it about the racial justice circle. Mary Catherine, have there been much discussion of that sort of thing, trying to combine coalitions, if you would?
Well, we don't have coalitions. We do work with the Black Lives Matter group, with our signs and meeting with them. But we have done it with Protestant churches as well as Catholic churches. So that's an alliance also. But yeah, I think I missed the last meeting. I think I was at the symphony or something. But yeah, we don't do many alliances, but we do have some. But I think that's right. We do need to work with other groups. If we could find another church of color, that would be great for us too, I think.
I was thinking maybe Saturday when I'm at SBCLT, I might see if there's anybody there from I think it's St. Rita's down there, or St.
Veronica's.
St. Veronica's. I might ask around as I'm meeting people. And then the question is, well, how do? I mean, we don't want to leave our church and they don't want to leave there. So yeah, it is very tricky. Father, did you want to give us some?
Well, another church that we might want to look at or think about is St. Francis Xavier. It's close by to us. And I think, I think part of the difficulty is defining what the role of doing that is, and what what consequences there actually will be with that. So I am really good with coming up with all kinds of ideas, but do they really lead anywhere that makes a practical, broader difference? Makes me feel good in the moment, but so I think asking the question, what's going to be the most effective tool to really have an impact, I think is at least a meaningful question to ask. But one of the thoughts I've had before and just didn't carry through on was maybe what we could do. Well, let me back up. There was an Episcopal priest who's a friend of mine who had a very Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in West Baltimore, a very small African-American church. And he and I had talked about the potential of us doing not alternating our liturgies, but alternating a prayer time for reflection and prayer. And one time it would be at St. Vincent's, and one time it would be at Holy Trinity, and would be really reflective of some of the issues that are going on, which would prompt some very nice, hopefully nice conversations. So that might be something we might want to approach Father Xavier about at St. Francis, and see if he might be interested and their community interested. And part of the Seek the City, we're really talking about parishes doing things with each other because we're so isolated from one another as it is. But again, being clear about how the meaning of this and the scope of it in terms of its impact.
Father, I think what you said is right on the money and very important. And that it maybe does begin with some just discussions and really talking with each other. One of the things I've always felt uneasy about has been the way suburban Catholic parishes hook up with an urban parish. And to me, often takes on an almost paternalistic kind of thing. It's not an equal sharing. And well, I don't need to say anymore. You all understand. So I think what you're saying is really wisdom in terms of moving with the Spirit, but moving in a careful way and in a dialogue way, so that we do something that is mutually satisfying for both.
Yeah. Maybe some of the questions that Dr. Gordon put out there for us might work to discuss together. The ones that I think the Jerrys are going to work on. They may pick some of them out.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
And is it Jerry Filkowski that has her hand up?
Yeah, the one who said she wasn't going to say anything else. But I'm thinking that this thing, I like Ray's idea. this thing about fear, some of the roots of that are obviously we're fearful about what we don't know, but other roots of fear that are really important is not just we're fearful of what we don't know, but we first of all are fearful because we think that people don't know we exist, that we're not really seen, that we're invisible. So acting out of fear sometimes makes you visible, maybe in a negative way, but it makes you visible. And the third thing fear is about power and who has the power. And that applies to what Dr. Gordon was talking about. So I'm thinking about, so I'm taking us home again, so to speak. I'm thinking about all the committees that we have at St. Bede's and all the good things they do. And I'm thinking about the Synod in the fall and the following fall and enlarging our tent. But I wonder if as a community, if we have to have a gatherings first to identify what our fears are and where we too may lack empathy, because sometimes we kind of really pat ourselves on the back. I mean, I think we're wonderful too. I think we're outstanding, but we are so not perfect. And I just think if we could work, like certainly Dr. Greer's questions would help with this too, but I think if we remember that fear, it has those elements to it. It's fear of what we don't know, fear of losing power, and fear that we don't exist, that we won't be seen. And that's a really great fear, like for instance, in our transgender community, that it's so hard that people don't know that they exist and don't want to know that they exist. I mean, it's kind of like heartbreaking. So across the board, we have all these incredible committees. And I think even if we just had some kind of union of the various groups in the church, just talk about some of these things. And then I thought when Ray was talking, there's also Monsignor Bazzelli's parish, I think, which is African American. And he's very social justice oriented and grounded. And so that's another possibility for us. But I think we might have to start at home. Just saying.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Jerry. Definitely.
Thank you, Jerry.
Welcome.
And Pat?
Jerry, you and I are on the same page here. I had put up my hand because as part of my women in the church study circles that I've been doing, there's several other parishes that have gotten involved. The most prominent of which is St. Bernardine's, which is where Rich Bazzelli is. And I have several people from St. Bernardine's that are in my groups, and I've arranged, Colleen and I are actually going to go to Mass at St. Bernardine's in a couple weeks so that we can meet up with them in person and just celebrate with them. And we might be able to find some way of coordinating beyond just this. So
That's great. Thank you. And I think that we have some opportunity with these questions, Dr. Gordon's questions, with the prayer night or discussion. We could, do it with St. Bernardine's, for example. I think that's a good suggestion. Anybody else want to weigh in on anything?
Since we're in our closing kind of time
Hold
period.
on 1 second, Skip. Joan Cub was raising her hand.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
I don't know how to raise my hand with.
And that's all right.
Me either,
the-
Joan. I can't find my hand.
I can't find mine either. I just have a lot of thoughts going through my head, and I can't make sense out of them. But what has been coming to me, I think, is going along with what Jerry just said, the need to actually stay within right now. And I say that from the perspective of looking at myself, trying to understand. And so you have to understand where I come from. I come from South Dakota, which just is terrible in terms of, the views, etc. And so, and it's views in terms of Native Americans too, so and so I have relatives like this. And so looking at how to deal with that, I'm going back there in 3 weeks. I'm going to run it. I'm avoiding people because I just can't deal with it. So in a way, I think what I'm saying is it's almost, for me at least, it's necessary to sort of build this empathy to try to understand other people. That becomes important. So.
Yeah, I agree, Joan. I feel the same way going to Ohio. And I keep thinking about how I'm going to have some of these discussions and trying to listen more and be empathetic. And yeah, it's.
What if you just don't have the discussions and talk about fun things and forget the discussions if it's going to lead you to have, I mean, it's enough to go to South Dakota, to go to Ohio and take the trip as it is. You know, why not just have fun and just tell them you don't want to talk about it?
Well, then we don't make any progress, you know, there's
That's
no.
the issue.
Progress with them anyway. They're going to be they're probably blockheaded about it anyway. And I mean, you know, one person going on a trip isn't going to make, you know, isn't going to change their minds, or as Father Ray would say, change their hearts.
Well,
So
we're talking family. We're not talking about one trip and never see them again. Oh, okay.
family too. I mean, I'm saying, you know, if you're going to take this trip, it's a trip. So it's going to take you time. It's going to cost money. It's going to be, you know, traffic, whatever you're doing. And then you see these people and, you know, you don't want to have a miserable time. So sometime what I do like this is find something else to talk about. And I know I'm not going to change minds or hearts, and they know my views, and they're not going to change because of what I believe. So it's just my old lady opinion.
Thank you, Jerry. Father, I think put his hand up first.
Who? Me?
Father. That's
Oh,
you.
just to respond to Jerry, a real life example. So my best friend, we're politically very different. And one of the things that's happened to him as he's gotten older is he's become progressively more conservative. And, you know, when we get together for lunch once a month, and we have learned how to, we talk about his kids and his grandkids and my cancer and all kinds of fun stuff. But but we always do end up talking about politics. But the foundation for it is we know we genuinely care about each other. So how we say what we say is different than what is oftentimes the case. And what has happened is my intimacy with him has deepened because I gain a richer understanding of where these come from in him. And in all honesty, some of it does come from fear. And we have a chance to talk about that. And he has an opportunity to gain a richer understanding of where I am. And that so it's taken time for that to happen, but we've not decided, well, we're not going to talk about that anymore. We really used our relationship as a way to engage at a different level. And over a lengthy period of time, I would say over a number of years, I think there's been some real growth for both of us in mutual understanding. And I think a softening of our perspective about where the other person is, which goes back to whoever brought up compassion the first time.
Thank you, Father. And I think Marianne was next.
I think Father probably said it all, but I think if you go on a trip like this and there's a spirit-filled moment, an opportunity to plant a seed, what may happen, you know, we may go in saying, I'm not going to change their minds, but in so doing, we have admitted that nobody is going to change our minds. And we might both learn. If, you know, I don't seek arguments in this. I have a brother in Texas who is difficult, and I have to get better at gently engaging, but I think we could both grow from a conversation that was done with respect, rather than pretending it doesn't exist.
Thanks, Marianne. And as long as Al's not going to refute anything you said, I'll call on Al.
What strikes me that is going as a part of this whole process, the synodality of Francis is exactly what he's trying to do, is to break down the walls that divide and providing a groundwork to talk to people, to talk with each other with respect, without judgment. And we really need to pray very much for the success, the long-term success of this synodality going on in our church. I have just been watching the history of the liturgy put on, and today's session was about Vatican Council, the Vatican II Council, and what happened there when people started listening to each other. There were factions, and some of the factions never reconciled, but totally. But the decree on liturgy only had 4 votes against it out of 2,400, almost 2,500 bishops. Wow. And so listening to that development, this is what Francis is trying to do now within the church. So our commitment to that style of dialogue, I think, is critical.
Thank you, Al. And I'm sure Father's going to jump on that.
No, no, I'm not going to jump on that at all.
Go like this?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. And I sent out an email today. So please, please, please read the Instrumentum Laboris. I'm only about a third of the way through it, but it really is quite extraordinary. Just for lots of thought, conversation, and reflection. I was going to share a technique with everybody that I use with couples when they're talking about arguments. So I say, I give them a stone. So when an argument comes up, there I invite them to go get the stone and put it on the table. That's the problem. So they're both talking about it. They're not talking about themselves. So it takes away that personalization that's so often connected to an issue that makes the conversation really, really difficult. It doesn't work all the time, but thought I'd share a neat little process that has some potential to work.
Yeah, that's good. It was kind of like way back when I remember talking to a group saying, whenever you're discussing something, don't use the word you. Always say I. This is how I feel, or this is what I think, but not you always do this or you. So I think that's kind of a similar thing to talking about the problem as opposed to the person. Al, you're muted.
I was just imitating the pastor. The link that you sent did not work for me. Okay. So I don't know what the story is there.
Well, I put a link to the Vatican, and I think Colleen changed the link to a different one. So I'll alert her tomorrow so that we'll send out, I'll ask her to go back and test whether she can click on it and get somewhere. If not, we'll resend a different link that gets through. But thank you for.
They already did. I saw it. They said Ray's link did not work and Colleen just sent a new one.
Oh, okay, good.
As we speak.
Well, that's interesting because I tried the link that I put in and it worked.
Huh.
Oh, well, you didn't. Well, let me clarify.
You have to take that up with Colleen.
Okay, bye.
I just wanted to make sure everybody saw in the e-news the thank you from Dr. Melanie and Sharon, Dr. Melanie Thomas and Sharon, the words of gratitude about the donation. I want to just make sure everybody saw that in the e-news, because it was very nice. If you didn't, and she talked about the things that they're doing and how they use the money, and it was used, I think, excellently. So hopefully Saturday I'll be able to see some of the transformation of things. And if anybody is not going to the Pride Parade and would like to join me, it's from noon to 2 o'clock on Saturday. It's a community mixer. It's to kind of explore the Black Butterfly Teaching Farm and to just see what progress has been made. And Skip, I think you wanted to talk about a book that you'd read recently.
Yeah, and I wanted to remind everybody, remember we were looking at books to read and breaking into groups. I would like to see us actually set up some dates in the future where we talk about what we've read and recommend. And I'm going to very briefly suggest something that's a little out of the ordinary. I just finished reading John Thompson, the former coach of Georgetown. He died a couple years ago. I Came as a Shadow. If any of the women and men in our group are basketball fans and you really know anything about John Thompson, this is a great read. And it's a great read to understand racism from a Black perspective, because he grew up his early childhood in Southern Maryland. He talks about that. His father said to him all of his life, and his father was a worker, he was pretty poor, study the white man, study the white man. And Thompson, first Black coach of a basketball team, first Black coach at Georgetown, he actually made an effort to bring in kids from poor backgrounds and poor neighborhoods. Journalists said that he was trying to have a Black basketball team. He's extremely blunt. If you want to know how he felt about Iverson, Patrick Ewing, all the people who went to the NBA because of him, it's great. And I'll just close with this, maybe it's entice you to read it. He talked about how reporters were always putting him down because he banned journalists and reporters from the practice sessions. And they came up with all kinds of reasons. The real reasons is he was very outspoken. And he said sometimes when he grabbed a kid who was coming from a rough background, he had to talk to them in the language they understood sometimes, and he was correcting. So he was throwing MF and all the other words around like crazy. He said, I'd have been nuts to have journalists and reporters in the room when I'm doing dealing with my guys. But seriously, it's easy, it's light, it's fun, and it really gives you how so many of us in my generation grew up dealing with racism, reacting to it, and it's blunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
I have a book I could suggest.
Sure.
I don't have it with me, it's downstairs. It's by Howard Thurman. It's called The Essentials of Essential Writings of Howard Thurman. And it's sort of a deep philosophical and spiritual talk about humanity and our relationship with God, and so it's very deep. He's known as a mystic, and he's deceased now, of course, but he was one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s advisors at the time. He was I guess you call that a mentor. So I highly recommend it. I'm not finished with the book yet, but John Rogers got me interested into him.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. And I also want to remind everyone that we will not meet the third Wednesday of July because of vacations, kind of like we haven't done every year. So we'll be back in touch again in August. And thank you for the suggestions. Think about anything else. And I probably will be talking to some of you about if you would like to lead that discussion that we talked about earlier. So I think Skip's going to, oh, by the way, you don't have to fill the whole hour. If anybody wants to discuss a topic or
Yeah,
present,
no.
it doesn't have to be the whole hour. You can say, hey, can I have 20 minutes? Whatever, because
5
you're
minutes. 10
sick of
minutes.
us. We'd like to, well, I don't know, maybe more than 5 minutes, Skip. No, I'm kidding.
And I'm sorry I missed all of you tonight.
Jody had
Oh, that's
was
okay, Jody.
fixing dinner
Oh,
for people,
okay.
so, hi, Jody. All right, I think Skip's going to close us out with a prayer.
Yeah, I don't know where I found this, probably from Richard Rohr's reflections, but it fits perfectly some of the things we touched on tonight.
Mhm.
Let us pray. Holy Spirit, some say that we are entering a new age of you, a time when what we must purge, what no longer works, a time to look forward to what is to come. As order and control seem to be running their course, let the breath of you waft over us and change our hearts and our direction. Be a personal and communal new Pentecost in our lives, Holy Spirit, and help us really to love. Amen.
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 Thank you. That was beautiful. So anybody else have any parting comments they'd like to share? Otherwise, we thank you all for coming. I know we're a small group tonight, but dynamite group, quality, not quantity. So have a great rest of your, what day is it? Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week and then weekend. Hopefully I'll see you all Sunday. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Love you all.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Love you.
Bye.
Goodbye, family. Saints of St. Vincent.
That was cute.